Hello, welcome to the Augmentation of Man with Kent and Renee Miller, where we are giving the future.
We are going to speak about today forgiveness in our awakening, forgiving ourselves in our able to awaken to what is going on around us.
And within us too.
And that's why I said awaken the self.
So as we're awakening and we have these realizations of events that may have taken place in our past lives, that we are careful not to hold ourselves hostage from our spiritual progress by judgment and by guilt, by victimization, those sort of things, which can hold us back. And the object is to realize that this is all a part of our past, and they are the lessons that are held by the higher self and the soul. And then we can move forward into the next cycle of conceptual learning, which is a higher cycle.
We're going to discuss this in this following video. And it's taken from yesterday's meditation of approximately 4 pages. And it's good to have communication again with the spirits. It was becoming somewhat sparse in the past, just a few things. But now, with yesterday's meditation and this morning, we are beginning to open up into new areas of understanding and try to communicate this understanding to you.
And just to back up, the reason why this communication has been sparse is if you have seen our video on the crossover and the changes that are happening within our atmosphere. Anytime you have atmospheric disturbances, you are going to have a breach in the communication, because the communication, this telepathic communication, travels over the plasma that's in the atmosphere. And so if you have a disturbance, it's going to disrupt that communication.
And we were told before this happened that this sparse communication was actually going to happen.
And so yesterday's meditation brought some lessons with it, and there is a core understanding bringing all those lessons together.
We're talking about crude awakening.
This was the message.
That's a message that came through. A crude awakening by humankind over exhaustive nature within.
And so when you looked up the definition of these words that they are giving, they're usually a literal definition. Sometimes they're metaphoric, but one of the definitions of crude, which fits in the context of this sentence or these 2 sentences, is an unprepared state, or it can mean undeveloped, unrefined, or incomplete, or it can mean undisguised, meaning it's right in your face. So they're talking about the awakening of humanity, and we're going to kind of digest what this crude awakening means and the over-exhaustive nature within.
Yeah, and we're talking about now at least some of humanity is going to have an awakening. Not all humanity, but some humanity. And it may be a beginning of an awakening requiring the development and completeness of understanding, redefinement to bring the complete development of understanding. Or it may be one that's are undisguised, maybe in our face and we don't see it.
We don't see it coming.
We don't see it. We are unprepared. We continually put ourselves in the unprepared mode for these things that jump right in front of our face.
And because the possibility of it being that we're unprepared for these events to happen, this awakening and the percolation of past memories coming up to our recognition is going to spur a lot of intense thinking and contemplation within that is going to be exhaustive for us. And this is our interpretation of the message.
Renee had a dream very recently, and she's going to explain it. And this communication that we had yesterday and this morning actually helps us understand what her dream was. And if you'll go ahead and talk about your dream.
And so I awoke to this dream of my mother and we were out on this very kind of a desolate landscape. There was nothing around as far as buildings or civilization, but we were standing at a little cliff, and this huge river, very wide river, and it was this clear blue water, wasn't moving too rapidly. And my mother appeared younger, and we were lost. We were trying to figure out how we get back to civilization or where we were supposed to be. And
well, you really didn't know where you were supposed to be.
Not really.
At this point.
But I knew we had to get back to where there were other people.
Where you started from.
Right.
And when she talks about going back to civilization, it depends on this time frame here and what defines civilization for you then.
Yeah. And so I held out a stick to my mother, and because we were looking at this map and we weren't sure how to get back to where we thought we needed to be, and this big river in front of us, I thought, well, the quickest way to get there is just to swim it. So I held out a stick to my mother and I said, jump. And this exhilaration came over me in the dream, where I felt this great energy and charge and thrill of this jumping into the water. And she was still holding on to the stick when we landed in the water, but she was younger. All of a sudden she was younger than me, and she couldn't swim, she wasn't a strong swimmer. And so I was swimming and swimming, and it didn't take long before I realized that I was becoming exhausted, and we were nowhere near getting through to the other side, and I was having to tote her along. And so I awoke not knowing if we drowned or not. So when Kent went into meditation, I started to ask about this dream, and I asked if this was another lifetime, and we were told
that
it was
the part that
it was one
of
many lifetimes.
And the part that she asked if she had drowned, it becomes irrelevant.
That's what the guide said.
It's a lesson.
It was irrelevant.
Yeah.
So why is it irrelevant? You know, if this is another lifetime and this is the story, why is it irrelevant?
Because we tend to focus, if we realize there's another lifetime that we have, we focused on our titles then, what we did, things that are irrelevant, not the lesson that was meant to be learned from that lifetime.
So we're focused on the story.
The story, not the actual learning process.
Okay, so we tend to chase things as humans in the spiritual sense. We tend to chase things that don't have the relevance to our higher learning and understanding, which is where we really need to direct our attention to. So while it's fun to learn about our past lives and the story, it's really not serving us well in our intellectual growth if we are not focused on the lessons. So while I thought about this dream and being told that it was past life, I came to realize that my now mother, in that lifetime, we were probably sisters and little children, or girl. It may have even been boys, but we were children, and she was younger than me. And so then I started to contemplate, wow, could it have been that we did drown? And if we had drowned, what is my role in causing my sibling, my younger sibling, to drown?
What was
is
the
that?
lesson? That actually goes back. What was the lesson to be learned by you and her jumping into the river? What was the lesson there to learn?
Mhm.
Do we tow another along through our life?
And perhaps this is not clear. This lesson is not clear at this time. And so when the guide proceeded in this message yesterday, he said, to be learned, understand, forgiveness, augmentation by the human spirit. So augmentation is to make bigger and better. So we have to kind of magnify the forgiveness.
Well,
And that forgiveness is both ourselves and
others. We have to
Mhm.
learn how to forgive first of all ourselves,
Mhm.
because we carry that burden so long
Mhm.
through life. And if we don't forgive ourselves, how can we forgive others?
Mhm. And the guide elaborated on that and said it's all inclusive. And he continued to say, apprehensious nature enfolded within. So apprehensious, the root word of that is apprehension. And I immediately went to like, causes me tension. It causes me this negative feeling within.
What's normally used in the
Mhm.
language.
But when I looked the word up in the dictionary, it had another meaning that actually fit better in the context of the sentence. And that meaning was acceptance or receptivity to information without passing judgment on its validity, often without complete comprehension of the information. So if you go back to my dream, and when I realized that perhaps when I told my mother, who was then a sibling, to jump into the river, and perhaps it resulted in our demise, and immediately started to feel guilty about it. What the guide was saying is just accept it and don't pass judgment on it. What you need is a more comprehensive understanding of the information. So don't judge it at first glance. We need to dig deeper, and we need to understand what the meaning is of that event.
Yeah, and you have to remember, many are completing the learning of the first 4 dimensions, third dimension being what we're in right now. The events that took place in the first 3 dimensions of space are part of the learning process, and the 4th dimension is time itself. So it will be bringing forward major lessons that we need to relearn if we've forgotten, and understand what those lessons are, to move ourself, the soul itself, forward to the next level of understanding.
Mhm.
We have to do this.
So we may not have complete understanding of all that has happened in all these past lifetimes. And as they start to percolate up to the surface, as we're reintegrating with our higher self, which is starting to occur right now, it's going to be somewhat exhaustive in our search for answers, but they're telling us it needs to be done.
We released the true story to find out what is going on.
It's all about the lesson.
Yes.
And so we're being told to open up our field of view. Don't focus on this little part of it, which is the story, but open it up to all the possibilities. And that would be even possibilities of not just what we perceive as good, or blocking out what we perceive as bad, or what's interesting versus what is not interesting, but look at the entire picture.
And you've got to do this without judgment on
Mhm.
yourself and without victimizing yourself.
Right. Because, well, today society wants to make us victims.
Yes.
It's just a kind of a common theme, but it is disabling to us. So when we get caught into that victimization, we relinquish our self-actualization, which is what we're trying to do at this time, and our full potential. It also squelches our self-esteem and our self-worth.
And you got to release the emotional part, the emotional story. You got to release that so you can move forward.
And so we're really focusing on the abbreviated story. It's not the whole story, not all of the, elaborate,
Well, the emotion.
feel good, or the emotional aspect of it, all of these things that we tend to focus on. But realize, and this is what the guide said yesterday is, or I'm sorry, that was actually this morning. That it is the allegorical nature of all things that need to be adhered to. So an allegory is a spiritual meaning through material form, a spiritual meaning through our physical presence. And each life is a parable. It's a story designed to teach us some truth or a lesson or a multiplicity of lessons.
Yeah, and to learn that Renee had gotten each life story is a parable. As in the Bible, there's a lot of parables, and you got to figure out what it truly means. Is the story designed to teach us, not just tell us a story, but to teach us or give us a lesson?
And so, yeah, we need to look at it as not the big story that we like to repeat.
So each lifetime is a parable.
It is the lessons that we go within, and we contemplate the lessons that we are getting and integrate that into the entirety of our being, which is how we're integrating our physical self with the higher self. And so it's just a story. Remember, the guide actually told us it's an allegorical piece, and meaning the piece within. So if we understand it's just the story, what is the lesson? And to redirect our search to the lesson, releasing the judgment, releasing the ego, and bring peace within.
And you've heard us talk about, you got to have peace within before you can bring peace outside of you to others or other events. You've got to have peace within. And if you have peace within, it also brings love.
And so that lack of peace creates this inner turmoil. And that inner turmoil is hung up on the emotional aspect. And so we just release that emotion comes from our judgment. And just to focus on, it's just a story. It's just a parable. But in that parable, what am I learning?
Right. And once you find that, you're going to be well on your way to a higher self.
Thank you for joining us. And I do want to say that the books in the augmentation series, I wanted to reduce them for Christmas, but they're already reduced so much that Amazon won't allow me to drop the price any further. They had a price increase earlier this year. So I'm sorry, we can't offer a sale. It's already at the basement price. But if you haven't gotten the books, do take a look at them and think about, contemplate perhaps a gift for someone else who's also a spiritual seeker. So with that,
We'd like to say thank you
and
Merry Christmas.
peace be with you on your journey to enlightenment. Have a good day.